Vanessa, very quickly, before we go into fourth lane, why don't we start with a little intro on you?
Sure. What do you want to know about me?
Who's Vanessa?
Who is Vanessa?
Before fourth lane.
Before Fourth Lane. I would say Vanessa is someone who has had a really lucky journey to Fourth Lane. I'm someone that I can't say that, 10 years ago, if you asked me what I want to do when I grow up, I would say I don't know. And I've just been lucky that I've had this path that ultimately has led to Fourth Lane. So, my initial background was I had a business interest. So I was at Queens, did commerce, and the whole journey has been about skill gathering. And the skill gathering has been a mix of business and law. I practiced law at a Bay Street law firm doing M&A and securities. And then from there, had an amazing opportunity to join a single family office for a family in Toronto, and learned really the inner workings of a version of a single family office. From there, I had the opportunity to meet Ken, the founder of Fourth Lane, and he presented me with this idea of a gap that he saw in the marketplace. And so really just kind of with the trust that I had in Ken, with the belief that I had in the opportunity, jumped right into Fourth Lane, first in actually a legal capacity as general counsel, which was really interesting because it's a new firm, a new space in the market, and I got to build the plumbing, the infrastructure of Fourth Lane. From there, I realized that what I really love to do is be with people. So I traded in the contracts for people, and I'm now officially on the client side where I get to engage with current clients and prospective clients. So in summary, I think Vanessa is someone who I just love. I love meeting people. I love getting as many tools in my tool belt. And I'm somehow found my way in a role that allows me to do all of that.
So you say you were really involved in the plumbing, the building
Yeah.
out plumbing. So building a company, that means a certain set of things. So what is it like when you're building a family office?
So, I mean, I think let's differentiate between single family office and then what Fourth Lane really presented ourselves to the world as multifamily office, which, to be honest, I think the terminology multifamily offices can be confusing. It can mean a lot of things. Let's just actually refer to Fourth Lane as a wealth management firm for ultra high net worth individuals and families. We have some clients that are single, and so the concept that you have to have a family to come to Fourth Lane, or that we are a place that is working with a select group of families and that's it. So our doors are open to any ultra high net worth individual that wants to invest globally in an open architecture ecosystem and with a focus on alternative asset classes. But what that meant for our version of a multifamily office. So one big thing is getting registrations. In the single family office world, you think about that, but when we are holding ourselves out as portfolio managers, as fund managers, that was a big chunk of getting set up. So navigating the regulatory framework of the Ontario Securities Commission, all the provinces that we operate in, learning how to set up funds. We have the way that we interact with clients. We offer them access to 6 different asset classes. And within each asset class, we have pooled vehicles that really allows us to aggregate client buying power so that we can diversify clients' assets over managers, opportunities, and access things that you might not otherwise be able to access just on your own. So I had to figure out how to set up funds, the proper things as basic as setting up the proper account opening documents. As exciting as that is extremely important. Setting up custodian relationships, like really everything that you would think of on how do you manage the assets of people that are trusting you with their extremely hard-earned wealth.
So you still, from what I know, spend a lot of your time on the operation side of the business, right? But how much, has it been an adjustment to go onto the client side? And then what's that like being on the client side, right? Dealing with
Yeah.
existing customers, bringing on new families, building those
Yeah.
pipeline of relationships. Like, have you really enjoyed that part?
I love it. It's my favorite part, absolutely. And, I think you learn quickly that you can have no preconceived notions or biases about what an ultra high net worth individual looks like or their needs or the education that they're coming in with about investing. So I love that every person that I meet, my job first is to say, who are you and where can I meet you? Right. And so, a large part of our client base are founders that have spent years of their life dedicated to their industry, dedicated to growing their business. And, they have a liquidity event where they are fortunate to have an amount of investable assets that need to be managed. And a lot of people might think just because you are, in a world where you suddenly have $20 million of investable assets, that means you know something about investing. I've actually learned that the people, the best thing you can do for someone is make them feel like they don't have to be embarrassed about what they don't know. And so I love being on the client side because one, naturally you're meeting people that are extremely interesting, have been successful, are passionate about something. And two, it's like a riddle that you get to solve every day of how can I connect with this person in the way that they need to be serviced and met right now.
It's funny you say that. So there was a multifamily office in the US that put out a report, and they had polled their very large base. I think they manage about $6 or $7 billion worth of assets, and they polled their entire base. And what they found is that a lot of their clients have some form of medium or moderate to extreme, uh, how would you call it?
Imposter syndrome?
Imposter syndrome. That's
Hmm.
the word. So and
Yeah.
and they explained it and they said, okay, well, it's because most of these people built a business and they started a business. They
Yeah.
successfully exited. Much of that is not familial wealth. It's mostly
Yeah.
generated, self-generated wealth.
Yeah.
Then suddenly you have all this money, and then you decide, okay, well, I'm going to start investing. Before they join a multifamily office, they start investing on their own, right? And you,
Yeah.
it's like, okay, well, here's some to real estate, here's some to venture. And somewhere along the way, you build a portfolio, but you're just doing it, just taking shots at the dark, and
Yeah.
you never get over that imposter syndrome. Do you find that, as a multifamily office professional, your clients really rely on you for advice, or is it just that they say, here's what we want, and I just want you to do the work of managing that money?
Think it's a mix. Why I was able to jump in with the imposter syndrome is because you we've been the advisor for people, not just on their assets, but also on really like entering this new world of wealth, right? So we are sometimes in a position where a client can say, I actually don't have anybody to ask about the questions I have about wealth. For example, and this might seem like an extreme example, but it's a real one. We have a client that said, how do I begin to understand how to take part in a fractional ownership of a plane, right? So the people that they've surrounded themselves with don't have that knowledge. You might be embarrassed to go ask other people because you feel like you should know that. So it's not even just about managing the assets. We are there as their advisor on entering the world of wealth. And so in terms of how do people rely on us for advice with their investments, it's a range. Some people say, Fourth Lane, I need you to manage this nest egg for me. um, like a pension plan, like Ontario Teachers Pension Plan or the Yale Endowment, where I know that no matter what is going on in the economy, this is just going to grow steadily. You're going to limit the volatility, and it's just going to be my multi-generational portfolio so that I can then go build my next company, right? So those type of people, they really just want to rely on a professional and say, over to you, Fourth Lane. But then we have some clients that say, I want to be part of Fourth Lane because I just sold my business. I don't really know what to do next in my journey. I don't know what my what's next is. So I want to be part of an ecosystem that can inspire me to the what's next. And they might say that Fourth Lane manage my nest egg, but I really want to take a portion of my portfolio to go actively invest in direct private equity businesses that I can have a contribution to the founders, and it's in a niche industry that I know I have sector expertise on. So it's a big range. But again, we only have about 60 clients. Our entire business model is bespoke, personalized customer service. I joke that I could probably answer a Myers-Briggs for every one of our clients. That's just what makes me happy, and that's how I like to interact with people. But at the end of the day, it's so important because people come with imposter syndrome. People come with different views on wealth. Some people are scared of it. Some people are excited by it. So you really, to be a good advisor, you have to have the time and the space to like understand your client.
Do you, so Fourth Lane, does it maintain one book of business or one book of investments and it pools the capital of all your clients, or is it that you have individual portfolios for each of your clients?
So from a one book of business perspective, like we are one team. Every client who's a client of Fourth Lane is a client of the team. So effectively, we are like your 15-person single family office. We have an open concept. I can
Yeah, you
um
can't stay with the rest of the team.
yeah, like I shout over to Wayne, our chief investment officer, to get his input on a client. People overhear me asking a question about a client and chime in. So we act as one team. There's no, these are my clients and the other client service person has their clients. It's all completely shared. But from an investment standpoint, every client comes to Fourth Lane with obviously a different investment portfolio. So they might have a large operating business, which effectively is 90% of their net worth in a private equity exposure, right? So we would consider that when diversifying them into other asset classes. Some people might come with 100% cash and say, over to you, Fourth Lane, manage that for me. So every client has a different portfolio based on how they are coming into Fourth Lane and obviously their objectives. But we, as I mentioned before, have 6 different asset classes. Within each asset class, for example, credit opportunities. Credit opportunities is what I would refer to as one of our building blocks. Within credit opportunities, that's actually accessing 8 different managers at this point. All of the managers are global. We actually have no Canadian managers on our shelf, not because we're anti-Canadian, but because our clients come to us with Canadian real estate, Canadian businesses. They have typically been able to access Canada more easily through their past investment relationships. So if someone comes to us and is invested in credit opportunities, that's 8 different managers at this point in time. Your, call it $1 million is invested in Fourth Lane's fund that is then investing in 8 managers that our team is constantly on top of. So if a manager is not performing or straying away from their strategy, we swap them in, swap them out without you having to redeem in and out of that strategy. We just think it's the best for diversification. We think it's the best for access, as I mentioned earlier. So yeah, that's how it works.
It's from a scalability perspective, that also is really good as well. So earlier,
Exactly. Yeah.
when you said that, putting funds together, those are all things that you had to do. So you almost operate each of these pools as like a fund of fund.
100%. Yeah.
And then you're
Yeah.
putting your clients into those funds, but the
Yeah.
operations of those funds are also switching out, and the modular
Yeah.
man based
Yeah.
on.
And, it's funny because it's a fund of funds. And the term fund of funds, I think, has had a bad connotation to it. But when we construct our funds, the number one thing, other than diversification, that we look at is how are the managers correlated to each other, and how are the managers correlated to public securities like stocks and bonds. And each manager plays a very specific role in building a comprehensive strategy. We have in this credit strategy some managers that might manage a $300 million strategy, and we have some managers that are managing a $2 billion strategy. So it's all about diversification. And at the end of the day, you can't pick a manager that is going to have a knockout year every single year in
Right.
every single climate. That is probably a Ponzi scheme. So, the benefit of diversification is the reality is that these managers who are all doing different strategies that are uncorrelated to each other, it really ensures that overall it's a consistent return, and you're not waking up one day to a 20% drawdown.
So let's talk about the story a little bit.
Yeah.
What I find fascinating, and one of the first things you explained to me when we met, years ago, was, hey, our client focus is, we don't just go for people that have already made a whole bunch of wealth, right? We're focused
Mhm.
on founders. We're focused on helping them try to build their businesses. And in that process of adding value, we also then are nurturing what can appear to be future clients. I think that's very cool. Can you
Mhm.
talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, I mean, I think if I reflect back on why we're like that, it really is in Fourth Lane's DNA. So, Ken Graywall, one of our founders, really he was the visionary behind Fourth Lane, and he spent his entire career in investment banking and capital markets, and largely outside of Canada. And he always said two things bothered him. Number one, the fact that Canada is very well regarded on the world stage for our pension plans, and a lot of the sovereign wealth funds around the world look to CPPIB, Ontario Teachers, for really pioneering that pension style approach. But the fact that that has not been made readily available to individuals in Canada, that bothered him. And the second thing that bothered him is he spent his life watching um, companies grow in Canada and then be really sold off into the US. So he said it was a personal mission for him to really support Canadian entrepreneurs and building great companies in Canada. So I think that's at the core of Fourth Lane CNA, is this desire to grow businesses. And so when we meet entrepreneurs, not only is it a great business opportunity to grow your own client and have that trust so that when they sell their business, you've already built that trusted advisor relationship, but it's mission driven, right? And we also recognize that if you're a founder and you're building a business in a niche industry, the navigating capital markets can be extremely stressful, extremely distracting, and um, at this stage, there really hasn't been an independent advisor to entrepreneurs that can advise on their wealth, advise on which investment bank they might want to work with, which private equity firm they might want to work with. Do they even want to consider selling at this point? How should they consider perhaps raising capital? Like all those decisions are from our experience when we speak to founders, top of mind. That's what keeps you up at night, other than, whether your business is successful. So we just wanted to be, we wanted to be value add to the entrepreneurs that we were meeting. And so we've learned that before a founder has their liquidity event, you have to hold their hand and help them in any way that you can navigate that journey.
One of the really interesting things is that a lot of founders, for the first time, when they're heading towards a successful exit, but they haven't exited, you know, they often overlook the fact that their estates and accounts are not set up the right way. And if they're not set up perfectly, then that exit event might look terrible and have huge liabilities on them. Um, is it often the case that you have to be sort of intervening in those situations and saying, okay, well, let's take a look at how you're set up, what that's going to look like when you exit, etc.
Mhm. So in the early version of Fourth Lane, we genuinely wanted to do it all. We wanted to not only be an advisor on the investment side, but we wanted to be an advisor on the non-investment areas. And obviously, a key part of that is tax planning, estate planning. Growing a business through COVID and just growing a business, you realize that you are strongest when you focus on your core competencies. And what we've realized is there are so many talented people out there that are going to service our client better if they are the top tax lawyer, or the top tax advisor at an accounting firm who does it day in, day out for 300 clients. They're probably going to be better for those clients. So we work hand in hand with these people, but Fourth Lane, the new version, we've realized, let's work collaboratively and serve the client in the best way by not trying to do everything.
So on that note, I think it's a good segue to what I wanted to speak with you about next is Fourth Lane 2.0, right? So there has been this early iteration. You say this a lot yourself, right? That you've like the business has been almost running like a startup, but you've now taken some very significant steps in institutionalizing. Okay, I don't want to use that word because it gives a negative connotation to what you're
No,
doing.
that's a fair word. That's a fair word. Yeah.
Fine, let's use a word: scaling and
Yeah.
institutionalizing the family office.
Yeah.
So tell me a little bit about that, some of the recent advancements that you've made.
Yeah. So, Fourth Lane, we got together in 2018. We were registered in 2019 and launched our first strategies in 2020. So we're about 4 years old now, if you start from when we launched our first strategies. And actually, as of last week, we welcomed 3 new partners and shareholders into our business who I really feel are going to scale Fourth Lane into what we have talked about as Fourth Lane 2.0. Those partners have, so how we met, they have all had decade-long careers on Bay Street in capital markets and investing. They saw the exact same opportunity that we saw 6 years ago, which is Canada has a real gap for a independent, open architecture, and institutional grade firm that can help clients invest globally in alternative asset classes. Our 3 partners, Robbie Pride, Robert Vanderhooft, and Peter Grosskopf, they've joined in as Fourth Lane.
The partners.
3 partners, yeah. Sorry, say that again.
Oh, the 3 new partners that you've brought on.
Yeah, three new partners. Yeah, Robbie, Pete, and Rob. Their vision and our vision have aligned. They're bringing their backgrounds, growing and scaling boutique firms and growing them to large firms that have been sold to Canadian banks. And they're bringing that leadership that I think every startup comes to a point where they say, let's add, as you said, institutional grade talent, let's bring in new perspectives and let's hit the ground running and scale fourth lane to hopefully a firm that every ultra high net worth person in Canada knows about and trusts as a solution to true global independent outsource chief investment officer capabilities.
Do you think that the addition of your new partners and the new direction that they're going to take, do you think that it's going to alter your client base to a degree? Whether it's, the types of people that you work with, whether it's minimum sort of net worths and things like that?
Good question. I don't think it will alter the types of people we work with. Um, from, I think the reality is we want to stay bespoke, customized, and we don't see scaling through bringing hundreds and thousands of clients on. I think the reality is we want to keep the team nimble, entrepreneurial, and so probably and hopefully this will be a problem in the future where we might have to raise our minimum threshold for taking on new clients, but that's an aspirational problem that I hopefully will get there soon. But we don't see ourselves becoming a multi-hundred client firm for the time being, or adding exponentially to our team.
Last point before we wrap up. There's always managers, there's always, funds that are looking to market to, groups like Fourth Lane, right? So what are some of the takeaways that anybody who is seeing this should keep in mind, whether it's to apply for funding, whether it's to, get advice on being on a shelf and etc.?
Good question. For Fourth Lane specifically, as I mentioned before, we are really focused on adding diversification to our clients' portfolio. So for Fourth Lane, we're really focused on global managers. We're really focused on alternative asset classes. For example, in private equity, just to give a concrete illustration, we find that a lot of our clients are excited to do their own venture capital investing themselves. So the way that we can provide a diversified exposure in private equity is to invest in more later stage companies, whether that's through funds, co-investments. And, we also have a big focus, as I mentioned, on finding managers that are not correlated to public markets.
Yep.
I think
Can I
at
ask
the
you
end
a
of the day,
question to what you just said? Because I think it's
yeah.
So when you say global managers and you're looking for diversification, I mean, my thought process initially was that there's two options, right? There's a global manager who focuses purely on real estate, for example, right? And your selection of multiple of those types of managers is what provides diversification. Or is it that you're looking for global, already diversified managers across multi-strat, et cetera? And then your qualification is just a compounding of that diversification?
No, I would say that the way that our investment team has operated so far, their job is to be, identifying, diligencing, selecting 300 managers to become the one, right? So they're the ones acting as your outsourced chief investment officer who gets to go shopping around the world. We have no fee sharing arrangements with the managers we invest in. We have no exclusivity, nothing like that. They really, based on their understanding of the macro thematic environment, they then see what asset classes make sense for our clients, and then they then see what strategies. So it's really our team going out and finding managers and then building that comprehensive offering for our clients.
Gotcha. Any sort of final points you want to conclude with before I close this off?
I mean, I think number one, thank you for having me on this. I have learned in the last 5, 6 years of being involved with Fourth Lane that the best thing for in the family office world is connecting people and sharing ideas. Like it can be a overwhelming world. It can be isolating. Um, it can be very confusing. So at the end of the day, like Fourth Lane, other than being a best in class investor, like we really just care about creating a strong global ecosystem. So thank you for letting me be part of your ecosystem. That's at the end of the day, I think what makes life fun, how we all become better investors, better decision makers. So that's something that apart from investing, like I hope that Fourth Lane is known for, that we are creating really strong, valuable ecosystems for our clients and the people around us.
Awesome. Well, look, I mean, to your point, that's the best part about what we do, right? It's getting to
Yeah.
know very smart people and all of them doing very interesting things, and we learn so much from everybody that we speak with. I thought I knew family offices until I started speaking to more family offices, and then you realize you don't know anything about family offices, and if you do, you just know something about that family office. So
Mhm.
it never gets old. But thank you for telling us a little bit more about your group, and I I think that we should do it again when.
Yeah, I look forward to being able to share more. Right now, the process that we're in. So we are also looking at our investment shelf because instead of just Wayne Cozen being our chief investment officer, he brings his 20 years of experience leading some of the largest groups at Ontario Teachers. We now have Rob Vanderhooft, who was CEO and CIO of Greystone, CIO at TD Asset Management. We are now in a position to really deepen our investment shelf and our offering. So I'd love to be able to update you in a few months when we know exactly what that looks like. We've also had 5 years of feedback, right? From what do investors and families really want to invest in and how do they want to invest? So stay tuned.
Oh yeah, stay tuned to part two.
Yeah.